It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're in our third segment this morning. Thanks for joining with us. If you're joining us live on our streaming site, on our website, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Please feel free to look around the site. We're building a new site. We're in the process of it, but you know, I'm a bit of a one-man band who's trying to play a symphony, and it's a lot of work. We're trying to improve it so that we can make it easier for you to find different stories and things like that. Make it a hub, if you will, of information. Meantime, you can find us by going to our website at americasvoicenow.org. You can watch the streaming episodes there. You can listen to the audio podcast there if you don't, if you just want to listen, you don't have to watch. I know I have a face for radio, not TV, but we're working on that too, by the way. No, I'm not getting plastic surgery, but we're building a video studio despite my mug. And we're going to add video and true episodes that are designed for TV, not radio, as an adjunct to what we're doing here. Because time is short, and we know that. And our goal is to make sure that we are educating as many people as we can. You know, one of the taglines that we use is delivering truth and exposing the mainstream propaganda. And that is part of our job. I believe that if Americans are given the information, if they're given the truth, that they are unbiased enough, open-minded enough to say, I'm willing to put aside my preconceived beliefs and maybe look at an alternative side. And if I'm critically thinking enough, I'll be able to formulate my own opinion, and I will then be able to stand on that opinion, because it won't be an empty box. It will be a solid stone. And they won't feel as if they have to waver like a sapling in the wind. The new gun rights war is back. And your Congress is again attempting to separate you from the one thing that protects you from their tyranny. That's not a path of logic that is hard to follow. Governments want you disarmed for a reason. And if there was ever a time when Americans could see that disarmament is truly a dangerous thing for our republic, it would be now. Look at the draconian rules that are being applied and shoved down your throat. Look at the oppression, the monitoring, the surveillance, the data collection that's going on. If you are believing that all of that is for your best interest, and then adding to your mistaken idea by thinking that it's okay for them to disarm you as well, that's a recipe, ladies and gentlemen, for disaster. Trust me, the soup they're building, you know, and you can think of it this way. They put into the pot some carrots. They put into the pot some potatoes. They put into the pot some cabbage, some beans. Fill it up with water. Put it on to cook. And they tell you that this is for your interest, for your best interest, so that you can be fed. It's surveillance. It's the IRS. It's the monitoring of everything that's being done. All for your protection, of course. But the chef here, the cook here, isn't telling you that he's got this little bottle. And when nobody's looking, he's pouring that in. What's contained in that bottle is poison. But you're so hungry, so desperate, that you're willing to sit there and eat it, even though you see those around you in your town, in your village, in your city, who are dying from eating it first. Peter King has come out. He's a Republican. He's out of New York. He's co-sponsoring these expanded background checks and the legislation that they're trying to steal one of your basic foundational rights that's in the second position in the Bill of Rights for a reason, because it's the one that protects all the rest. He's working with Mike Thompson, a Democrat from, go figure, California. This legislation they're working on is simply renamed something else, but it's identical to the legislation that Joe Manchin and Pat Toomey pushed through, or tried to push through last year, and got their butts handed to them. It would end all private sales at gun shows and private sales 1-to-1. It would end any classified ads that are online. So you wouldn't be able to advertise on any of these websites out there that offer you to meet face to face and purchase a weapon. It would end private sales between private individuals. It would force everyone to sell their firearm through a licensed dealer. You want to buy a gun, you got to buy a gun through a dealer. You want to sell a gun, you got to sell a gun through a dealer. You know why? It's just another form of tracking. They claim that it's to weed out felons, spousal abusers, illegal immigrants, and the other categories of prohibited buyers. Really? Well, first of all, they use the argument that this would end stuff like that LAX shooting and the New Jersey mall shooter and Newtown, Sandy Hook. Stop right there. Not a single mass shooting would be prevented by this. Every one of those people bought those guns or obtained those guns in a manner other than a private sale. Not a single one of them. But they're giving you the sleight of hand that every tyrant and every traitor and every treasonous piece of garbage in Congress gives you. It's like a magician who's encouraging you to watch this hand while this hand is actually putting the rabbit into the bottom of the hat. The truth of the matter is, our Second Amendment is unequivocal. It states emphatically that you have a right to bear arms. There are no caveats. There are no limits. And, the truth is that Thomas Jefferson was very clear about the real purpose and so were many of the other founders, by the way. He was just one of many. But he told us that the purpose of firearms was to defend your nation against tyranny. The Second Amendment, as a last resort, can be used by the people to defend themselves from tyranny and government. The Constitution preserves the advantage of being armed, which Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation, where the governments are afraid to trust their people with arms. John Adams. Patrick Henry, are we at last brought to such humiliating and debasing degradation that we cannot be trusted with arms for our own defense? You see, this goes to my point that I did in the first segment. And it's going to go to the point that I'm going to talk about in the second segment, or the last segment. This idea where Congress says, well, we have to try to figure out and interpret what the founders meant by that. This is all available to them. But they don't want to look at this evidence before they make their interpretation, because they have a preconceived bias as to what they want that interpretation to be. I mean, you can't get more clear than that. Are we at last brought to such humiliating and debasing degradation that we cannot be trusted with arms for our own defense? Patrick Henry. Sam Adams said, and the said Constitution should never be construed to authorize Congress to infringe the just liberty of the press or the rights of conscience, or to prevent the people of the United States, who are peaceable citizens, from keeping their own arms. The Constitution preserves the advantage of being armed, which Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation, where the governments are afraid to trust their people with arms. I mean, you don't have to look hard to find the statements of these men, who actually were the guys who wrote all of this documentation. I mean, the goal of an interpretation, in theory, right, is so that you understand, you're discerning what these people meant when they created this Constitution. Well, Jefferson also said, when all government, domestic and foreign, in little as in great things, shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, it will render powerless the checks provided on one government over one government on another, and will become as venal and impressive as the government from which we separated. Did you see that? That was a warning. When all government, domestic and foreign, in little as in great things, shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, it will render powerless the checks provided of one government on another, and will become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated. Well, they use the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause to excuse themselves from operating outside of the Constitution. Well, because of commerce, we have the right through interstate commerce to regulate firearms. The heck you do. He also said to us, Congress has not unlimited power to provide for the general welfare, but only for those specifically enumerated things. That takes all of these decisions that have been made since the 40s and the 50s surrounding commerce and makes them all null and void. You see, this issue of guns and gun rights and your ability to own and possess is what that is most offensive to them, or the reason that it's the most offensive to them is because it is the roadblock to their ultimate tyranny. And by regulating all sales through registered firearms dealers, they do what? They create a massive database, like every other massive database, that forces accountability onto dealers to act as the police department to monitor every transaction. And then they know who owns what, which makes confiscation the next step. And deniability for that confiscation, you can't say, well, I don't own it anymore. Well, where is it? I sold it. Okay, so what dealer did you sell it to? Right now you can say, I don't own it anymore. Okay, where is it? I don't know, I sold it. Well, who'd you sell it to? I don't remember. I don't have to remember. I'm not obligated to keep a record of that. Natural law, God's law, nature's law says, get out of my house. You don't have a right to know. And I will back that claim up using the force of this weapon. Now exit. The truth is, the strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is, as a last resort, to protect themselves against tyranny and government. Ladies and gentlemen, like an attorney in a courtroom, that statement alone sums up the case. And if you are the judge, then I level my final argument. The strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is, as a last resort, to protect themselves against tyranny in government. And when government is that entity which is trying to restrict and steal your right to keep and bear arms, that is tyranny. That is tyranny doing its best to disable that which is devised to keep it in check in the first place. We better wake up, and we better again gird ourselves for battle on this issue. They're keeping the smoke screen and they're pumping the smoke out, boy, to keep your eyes from seeing what's happening around you. But this is the kind of stuff that they're trying to pass while everybody's worried about Obamacare. It's sleight of hand. It's misdirection. And this is treason. It's your choice. But remember, whatever choice you make, it affects the rest of us. It affects your children and your progeny for the next 100 years. And so I throw down the gauntlet, which I've thrown down to you before. I'm not throwing it, actually. I'm just reiterating somebody else's statement. But I say, if you will not fight for the right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory will be sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. And there may even be a worse case. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it is better to perish than live as slaves. Winston Churchill gave us those words. I can find a lot of things I don't like about Winston Churchill, but in that statement, he was dead on. And when you are disarmed, we will have passed the first threshold. And we will be in the even worse case. We will have to fight when there is no hope of victory because we're fighting with broomsticks. Because at that point it would be better to perish than to live as a slave. The rights of self-defense, personally, communally, nationally, are inherent in your liberty and your freedom. They are in that kernel of self-determination and free will that you have been given by your Maker, by nature, and nature's God. These are part of natural law. The wolf does not ask, "May I defend myself, please?" The bear does not say, "How can I defend myself?" You have stripped my claws and taken my teeth. The strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is as a last resort to protect themselves against tyranny in government. Your Honor, I rest my case. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to tackle one more topic before we're wrapped for the day and for the weekend, and that new topic is going to be judicial terrorism. How the courts are fabricating and allowing a police state to exist, one which is oppressing you, about to steal your gun rights, beating you up, forcing you into things that you don't want, like Obamacare, forcing the EPA or allowing the EPA to force coal businesses out of business so that they can raise your necessarily skyrocket your electric rates. How ridiculous. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. We'll be right back.